My name is Douglas Mercer. I am 63 years old. And 5 days ago, I stood in the November rain at Beechwood Cemetery in Ottawa and watched them lower my wife Margaret into the frozen ground. We had been married for 38 years. She was the kind of woman who remembered every birthday of every neighbor on our street, who kept a notebook of recipes she had clipped from newspapers going back to 1987, who cried at hockey commercials and was not even slightly embarrassed about it. She taught adult literacy at the community center for 26 years. She believed that the ability to read was the most fundamental human dignity a person could possess. Her favorite thing in the world was sitting on the dock at our cabin on Lac des Chênes on Saturday mornings, drinking her tea and watching the loons. That cabin, I built the dock with my own hands the summer after we bought the property. I was a structural engineer. I spent 35 years designing buildings that could stand up to Canadian winters, to the weight of ice and snow, to the slow grind of freeze and thaw cycles. I understood stress. I understood load-bearing capacity. I understood exactly how much pressure a structure could absorb before something inside it quietly began to fail. I thought I understood the same about people. I understood nothing. On the morning of the second day after her funeral, my son Trevor and his wife Diane were already at my kitchen table when I came downstairs. They had driven up from Toronto the night before. Trevor said they wanted to be there for me. He said he was worried about me being alone in the house. He said it with his hand on my arm and his voice low and gentle, and I almost believed him. Almost. But when I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard them go quiet. Not the quiet of people interrupted mid-sentence. The quick, deliberate quiet of people who have just said something they did not want overheard. "Good morning, Dad," Trevor said. He was already in a pressed shirt. He had his laptop open on the table. Diane had made coffee, and she set a mug in front of me with a smile that was just slightly too warm, slightly too practiced. She was a real estate lawyer. I had always liked her well enough. But I had also always noticed the way she watched me when she thought I wasn't paying attention. Calculating something behind her eyes the way you calculate load tolerances in your head before committing anything to paper. "Dad," Trevor said, folding his hands on the table, "I know this is the worst possible time, but there are things that need to be dealt with, practical things, things Mom would have wanted handled." I wrapped both hands around the mug. The coffee was too hot to drink. I sat with it anyway. "What kind of things?" I asked. Diane opened a folder on the table between us. It was a thick folder, the kind of folder that tells you, before you read a single word of it, that someone has been preparing this for a long time. "It's just a care arrangement," she said. Her voice was smooth, professional, the voice she used in boardrooms. Nothing unusual. It's actually very common in Ontario now. A lot of families set these up when a parent reaches retirement age. It designates Trevor as your financial and medical representative. It gives him signing authority on your accounts and the property. Just to make things simpler. Just to make things simpler. I looked at the document. I did not pick it up. I read what I could from where I sat. My eyes found a clause on the second page. Authorization to transfer registered assets and dispose of real property, including secondary residences. "The cabin," I said. "It's just precautionary language," Diane said. "Standard boilerplate. It doesn't mean—" "The cabin has been in my family since 1978, I said. "My father built the main structure. My mother planted every birch tree along the shoreline. Margaret and I spent every August there for 38 years. Trevor leaned forward. "Dad, it's not about the cabin specifically. It's about making sure that if something happens to you, if you have a health event, a fall, anything, we can act quickly. You know how these things get complicated when the paperwork isn't in place." I looked at my son. He was 41 years old. He had my chin and his mother's eyes, and he was sitting at my kitchen table 4 days after his mother's funeral with a legal document asking me to hand over my life. "I'll think about it," I said. They looked at each other. Something passed between them, a small, relieved exhale. "Of course," Diane said. "Take your time. We're not going anywhere. We can sit down again tomorrow morning." They left to take a walk. I sat at the table alone. I looked at the coffee I had not drunk. There had been something in my gut since the moment I reached the bottom of the stairs and heard them go silent. The same feeling I got on a job site in Gatineau in 2003 when I looked at a foundation pour and knew, before I ran a single calculation, that something was wrong. It was not a loud feeling. It was quiet, cold, and very certain. I poured the coffee down the drain. At 20 minutes past 2 that afternoon, my phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, a Montreal area code. I almost let it go to voicemail. I picked it up. Mr. Mercer? The voice was a woman's, precise, unhurried, with the particular economy of language that belongs to people who are paid to say exactly what they mean and nothing more. My name is Colette Bouchard. I am a solicitor. I have been retained privately by your wife. I understand she passed away this week, and I am very sorry for your loss. I stood up from the table. Margaret didn't have a separate solicitor, I said. We use the same firm for everything. Peterson and Alt, here in Ottawa. Mr. Peterson handles your joint estate. Yes, Colette Bouchard said. I handle something different. Your wife first contacted me 14 months ago. She was very clear that I was not to reach out to you under any circumstances until she was gone. Mr. Mercer, I need you to come to my office. I can make time tomorrow morning, or today, if you are able. My hand tightened on the phone. What is this regarding? I asked. Her voice dropped slightly. Please come alone. Do not bring your son. Do not bring his wife. And Mr. Mercer, if anyone has presented you with documents to sign in the past few days, please do not sign them. Not yet. She gave me an address in the Plateau Montreal neighborhood of Montreal, 2 hours by car. She said she would be in the office until 6. I looked at the clock. It was 2:23 inches the afternoon. I told Trevor I needed to run some errands related to the estate. He offered to come. I told him I needed to do it alone, that I needed the time to think. He nodded in a way that was meant to look understanding and looked instead like relief. I drove to Montreal. It took 2 hours and 11 minutes. I do not remember most of the drive. Colette Bouchard's office was on the 3rd floor of a narrow stone building near Avenue du Mont-Royal. The building was old, solid, the kind of thing that had been standing since before either of us was born. Her office was small and organized with the precision of a person who trusted systems. There were law texts on shelves arranged by subject. There was no clutter. There was a photograph on her desk of 2 young women who looked like her daughters, and nothing else personal. She was in her mid-50s. Dark hair cut short, reading glasses on the desk in front of her. She stood when I came in and shook my hand with a firm, brief grip. Thank you for making the drive, she said. Please sit down. Tell me what this is about, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. She looked at me for a moment before she answered, the way people look at you when they are trying to decide how much you can absorb at once. Then she opened her desk drawer and placed a sealed envelope on the surface between us. My name was written on the front, Margaret's handwriting. I had seen that handwriting every day for 38 years, on grocery lists, on birthday cards, on the notes she left me on the kitchen counter before early morning appointments. The letters were smaller than usual, effortful. Your wife came to me in September of last year, Colette said. She was frightened. She told me she had been frightened for several months before that, but had spent that time gathering information before she was willing to put any of it in front of a lawyer. She was, in her own words, not willing to make an accusation she could not support. I did not speak. Mr. Mercer, your wife believed your son and daughter-in-law had been systematically stealing from your joint retirement accounts. She believed they were building a case, through Diane's legal contacts, to have you declared financially incapable, so they could assume full control of your combined assets before your death. And she believed, and she had evidence to support this, that they were making her sick. The room shifted, not in any dramatic way, more like the way a building shifts a fraction of a millimeter under load. Imperceptible, unless you know what you are measuring. I thought about the past 14 months. Margaret's fatigue, which the doctors had attributed first to anemia, then to early-stage neurological decline. The trembling in her hands that started last winter. The way she would sometimes stop mid-sentence with a look of confusion that passed over her face like a cloud, there and then gone. The hair she began losing in the spring. She had started wearing a light scarf indoors. She told me it was a draft. The doctors had said her symptoms were consistent with progressive neurological deterioration. She had fought that diagnosis with everything she had. Walter, something is wrong with me, she had said one night in August, gripping my wrist with surprising force. I know something is wrong, but I am not losing my mind. Whatever this is, it is not in my head. I had held her. I had told her we would face it together. I had believed the doctors. Oh, Margaret, she had not been confused. She had been right, Colette continued. She was methodical about it, she said. Over the course of 8 months, while she was declining, she built documentation. She photographed her meals when Trevor or Diane prepared them. She kept samples. She arranged private blood work through a clinic in Gatineau that your family had no connection to. She hired a forensic accountant in Toronto, someone Diane had no professional relationship with, to examine your investment accounts. I could not find my voice. The blood work identified elevated levels of arsenic, Colette said quietly. Inorganic arsenic. Administered in small, repeated doses over an extended period, it produces symptoms that mimic neurological deterioration. Fatigue, tremors, cognitive disruption, hair loss. Margaret had started wearing scarves in April. She told me she was cold. I had seen the evidence myself in the bathroom, in the drain, on her pillow, but I had told myself it was a symptom of whatever was happening to her neurologically, not a cause. The forensic accountant, Colette continued, identified approximately $740,000 removed from your registered retirement accounts over the past 4 years. The transfers were structured to appear as management fees and tax-related disbursements. They were authorized using a limited power of attorney signed by you 6 years ago. I remembered that document. Trevor had brought it to a family dinner at Thanksgiving. He had explained it as a simple administrative tool, just so I can manage the portfolio rebalancing without having to call you every time, Dad. You don't want to be on the phone with the bank every other week. I had signed it between the main course and dessert. I had not read it carefully. He was my son. There is something else, Colette said. She slid the envelope toward me. Margaret wrote this 4 months ago. She told me at the time that her symptoms were accelerating, and she was not certain she would be able to write much longer. She asked me to promise that this would reach you, and only you, after she passed. I gave her that promise. I picked up the envelope. My name, her handwriting, smaller than it should have been. Each letter formed with visible effort, the hand of a woman being slowly taken apart from the inside. I opened it. The letter was 5 pages long. I will not share all of it here. Some of it belongs only to Margaret and me. It is hers, and it is mine, and it will stay that way. But I will tell you what she needed me to know. She told me she loved me. She said she was sorry she had kept this from me for so long, and she needed me to understand why. She had been afraid that if I knew, I would go directly to Trevor. And she had overheard a phone call, 2 calls that told her Trevor had connections to people she did not fully understand. She said there were debts involved. She said there were names she did not recognize. She said she was not certain that confronting Trevor directly would end with a conversation. She had wanted to be sure. She had wanted to be certain the case was airtight before I knew anything, because she did not trust herself to keep it from showing on her face. She said she had understood, once she had the blood work results, that she was not going to recover. The arsenic levels from her earliest private test, taken 10 months before she died, were already at a level where the damage was cumulative and permanent. She had made a choice. She chose to spend the time she had left building the case rather than spending it in a hospital being examined by doctors who would find nothing they were looking for because they were looking for the wrong thing. She said, "Douglas, I know you. I know that when you read this, your first instinct will be to call Trevor, to give him the chance to explain, to sit across from your son and ask him why. Please do not do that. He had every chance. He had 38 years of chances. He chose Diane. He chose the money. Please let the solicitor and the police do their jobs." And then she said, "There is a bottle of vitamin supplements in the cabinet above the kettle. The capsules with the orange label. Diane bought them for you in September. Do not take any more of them. I had 1 tested. Get them out of the house tonight." I had taken 2 of those capsules that morning. I had taken them every morning for 3 months. I set the letter down. I did not realize until Colette quietly pushed a box of tissues across the desk that I had been crying. "What happens from here?" I asked. She picked up her phone. She made a call. "Inspector Tremblay," she said. "He's here. We're ready." 14 minutes later, a man walked into the office. He was in his early 50s, broad across the shoulders, with a careful, unhurried manner, and the particular stillness of someone who had spent a career listening to things people did not want to say out loud. He introduced himself as Inspector Raymond Tremblay of the RCMP Financial Crimes Unit. "Mr. Mercer," he said, shaking my hand, I have been working your wife's case for 7 weeks. She was an exceptional woman. I want you to know that what she did, what she built, under the circumstances she was living through, I have been doing this work for 22 years. I have never seen anything like it. 7 weeks? She had set this in motion while she was still alive, while she was still sitting at my table and holding my hand and telling me she was cold. We have sufficient evidence for arrest on financial fraud charges, Tremblay said. The arsenic documentation combined with the supplement analysis and your own blood work, and I want you to get that done this week, Mr. Mercer. We will arrange it privately, gives us grounds for attempted murder in your case. We have also formally requested authorization for exhumation of your wife's remains. Based on the documented arsenic levels from her private testing and the trajectory of her decline, our forensic toxicologist's assessment is that Margaret Mercer did not die from neurological illness. He paused. He looked at me the way people look at you when they are about to say the truest and most terrible thing they have ever had to say. Her death is being treated as a homicide, he said. The arsenic in her system at the time of her last private blood test, 4 months ago, was at a level consistent with that conclusion. I had known it. I had known it from the moment Colette said the word arsenic. I had known it the way you know a structural failure before the numbers confirm it, in the body, before the brain has finished its calculation. But knowing something in your gut and hearing it spoken aloud in a quiet office while the November light falls through the window are 2 different experiences entirely. One of them cracks something open that does not fully close again, but something else ignited too. Quiet, steady, the kind of heat that does not flare and does not smoke, the kind a structural engineer understands, the kind that drives impurities out of steel and leaves what remains harder than it was before. What do you need from me? I asked. Tremblay looked at Colette. She nodded. We would like to execute the arrests tomorrow evening, he said. We have the warrants, but there is one element that would complete the evidentiary chain beyond any reasonable doubt. We need Trevor to bring your supplements to your home, and we need to document him presenting them to you. On camera, I looked at him. You want me to invite my son for dinner, I said. He met my eyes. Yes. I drove back to Ottawa. It was past 9 when I got home. The house was dark and quiet. I stood in the kitchen for a long time without turning on the lights. Then I turned them on. I took the orange-labeled supplement bottle out of the cabinet above the kettle. I held it in my hand for a moment. Then I placed it in a paper bag and set it by the door for Tremblay's team. The next morning I called Trevor. I told him I had been thinking. I told him I had been too resistant, that Diane was right, that the paperwork made sense, that I was finally starting to understand what they had been trying to do for me. I told him I wanted to sit down properly. I said, I know I've been difficult. I think I'm finally ready to talk. I told him my hip had been giving me trouble overnight and I had run out of the supplements he had brought and could Diane bring more when they came. He was warm on the phone, relieved. He said, of course, Dad, we'll come at 7. Diane will bring the supplements. I'll pick up dinner. Tremblay's team arrived at 4 in the afternoon. They were 4 people. They were quiet, and they moved through my home with the professional economy of people who do this regularly. They placed a camera in the light fixture over the kitchen table. They placed a microphone under the lip of the kitchen counter. They fitted a recording device to my person, taped flat against my ribs on the left side. One of the officers, a young woman named Constable Habert, showed me the live feed from the kitchen camera on a tablet. Every detail. Margaret's blue mixing bowls on the open shelf. The crack in the grout along the backsplash I had been meaning to repair since 2019. The empty hook on the wall where her apron still hung. Just be yourself, Constable Habert said. Let them settle. Let them bring up the documents themselves. And if at any point you feel unsafe or you want us to come in, say the word, and we are through that door in under 10 seconds. What's the word? I asked. Loons, she said. I nodded. Margaret's favorite bird. They arrived at 7:15. Trevor had brought Lebanese food from the place in the glebe that we had been ordering from since the 90s. He carried it in the way he carried everything, with the slightly performative generosity of a man who wanted you to notice how much trouble he had gone to. Diane carried a canvas bag. I could see the outline of the orange supplement bottle inside it. Dad, Trevor said, hugging me. You look tired. It's been a hard week, I said. That was true. We sat. Trevor opened the containers. He talked about the drive from Toronto, about traffic on the 401, about a deal he was working on. He was expansive, easy, The version of himself I recognized from family holidays when he wanted something and was working toward it diagonally rather than directly. Diane was quieter. She kept glancing at the folder she had set on the counter near her bag, waiting for the right moment. I gave it to her. I reached for my glass of water and stopped. I pressed my hand flat on the table. "My knuckles," I said. "My hip has been bad all day. I ran out of those capsules 2 days ago. Diane, did you manage to bring more?" She smiled. "Of course," she said. She reached into her canvas bag and produced the orange-labeled bottle, Premium Joint and Mobility Complex. She opened it. She shook 2 large capsules into her palm and held them out to me with a glass of water. "Here you go," she said. I looked at the capsules in her hand. I looked at my son. He was watching me. He was chewing. His expression was patient and ordinary, the expression of a man waiting for his father to take his medicine. "Your mother," I said quietly. Trevor stopped chewing. She was the most methodical person I have ever known in my life. Diane's hand did not move. The pills sat in her palm. Her smile had not changed, but something behind her eyes had shifted, and it was not a small shift. "She was a literacy teacher," I continued. "She spent 26 years teaching people how to read, how to find meaning in written language, how to protect themselves with knowledge. And in the last 14 months of her life, she applied everything she knew about documentation and evidence and the patient, careful accumulation of proof to what was happening to her, to what was happening to me." Trevor pushed back his chair. "Dad, she photographed her food," I said. "She saved samples. She had her own blood tested in Gatineau. She hired an accountant you had never heard of. She retained a solicitor in Montreal, and she gave that solicitor everything, sealed, to be opened only when she was gone. And then she sat at this table with me, and she held my hand, and she did not say a word about any of it because she knew that if she told me, I would go to you directly, and she had heard enough to know that might get me killed." Trevor stood up. His voice dropped to something flat and dangerous. "Walt, stop talking. Sit down, Trevor. I said it the way you say it, to a structure that is beginning to move in a direction it should not move. Precise, final, not a request." Diane set the pills on the table. She looked at Trevor. That look, the one I had seen her give him 100 times without understanding it, settled into sudden clarity. The calculation, the check-in, making sure they were still synchronized. I looked at my son. He had his mother's eyes. He did not look like her at all. "Loons," I said. The front door opened. The back door opened. The kitchen filled with people in dark jackets. Inspector Tremblay walked in last, unhurried, with the particular calm of someone who has spent 22 years waiting for precisely this moment. "Trevor Mercer, Diane Mercer," Tremblay said. "He produced the warrant. You are both under arrest. The charges include fraud over $5,000, criminal breach of trust, administering a noxious substance with intent to endanger life, and first-degree murder in the death of Margaret Ann Mercer." Trevor said nothing. His jaw was set. His eyes were on me. He kept them on me while they cuffed him, while they walked him toward the door, while Constable Habert reached across the table and sealed the supplement bottle in an evidence bag. He looked at me the way someone looks at you when they cannot believe you were not what they thought you were. Diane started talking the moment she understood what was happening. She said it was Trevor. She said she had told him it had gone too far. She said she had tried to stop it. She said she had been afraid of him for 2 years. I did not watch them leave. I stood at the kitchen counter with my back to the door and listened to it close. Tremblay came back in. He put a hand briefly on my shoulder. "We have everything we need," he said. The preliminary hearing took 3 weeks to complete. The trial lasted 11 days. The prosecution presented Margaret's documentation, the blood work, the supplement analysis, the forensic accounting, the photographs, the signed affidavit she had submitted to the RCMP through Colette Bouchard 7 weeks before her death. They read her letter aloud in the courtroom. A Crown prosecutor named Valerie Goss read it in a quiet, steady voice, and by the time she reached the last page, the courtroom was completely silent, not the restless, shuffling silence of a room that is bored or impatient. The deep, held silence of people who are listening because they do not want to miss a single word. Trevor's defense argued that Diane had been the architect of the financial scheme and had administered the arsenic without his knowledge. Diane's defense argued that Trevor had coerced her, that she had been afraid, that she had tried to find a way out. They dismantled each other over 11 days, with the efficiency of people who had once trusted each other completely, and were now converting that shared knowledge into weapons. The jury deliberated for 4.5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Trevor received a life sentence with no eligibility for parole for 25 years. He will be 66 years old when he first faces a parole board. Diane received 22 years on the reduced charge of manslaughter, in exchange for her cooperation and the corroborating testimony she provided regarding Trevor's direction of the poisoning. She will be in her mid-70s when she is released. I drove home after the verdict alone. I parked in the driveway. I sat in the car for a while. Then I went inside. Margaret's reading glasses were on the side table in the living room, exactly where she had set them down the last time she used them. Her tea towel, the one with the small loons printed on it that she had bought at a craft fair in Perth years ago, was folded over the oven handle, where it always was. Small things. The particular geography of a shared life. I put on my coat. I drove up to the cabin. It was the first week of December. The lake was beginning to freeze at the edges, that thin, still ice that appears overnight and catches the morning light like pale glass. I walked down to the dock I had built with my own hands, and I stood at the end of it, and I looked at the water. There were no loons. They had gone south weeks ago, the way they always did. But I stood there until the cold became serious. And then I stood a little longer. "Margaret," I said to the frozen air, to the birch trees her mother-in-law had planted, to the gray December light on the water. "You built something extraordinary. You were sick, and you were afraid, and you were being taken apart piece by piece, and you spent every ounce of what you had left, not on rest, not on comfort, but on making sure I would still be standing when it was over. I did not know. I should have known, and I did not, and I will carry that. But I am standing." The lake was very quiet. A branch moved somewhere in the tree line. I turned around and walked back up the dock to the cabin. I unlocked the door. I went inside and turned on the lights. I have thought, in the weeks since then, about what I would say to anyone listening to this. I am not a man who gives speeches. I am an engineer. I believe in things you can measure and verify and demonstrate under load. So let me tell you what I know to be true. I know that the people who are most dangerous to you are not strangers. They are the people who know your habits, who know which supplements you take and at what time of morning, who know how you take your coffee and what documents you will sign without reading carefully because you trust the hand that gives them to you. The people who study you are not always studying you out of love. I know that the people who love you most are not always the loudest ones in the room. They are sometimes the ones sitting quietly beside you, saying nothing, carrying something alone, because they have decided that protecting you matters more than unburdening themselves. I know that aging does not mean you have forfeited the right to your own judgment, your own property, your own decisions. If someone in your life is telling you that you are no longer capable of managing your own affairs, ask yourself who benefits from that conclusion. Ask yourself whether the person pushing that narrative has taken the time to prove it to anyone other than themselves. I know that a document placed in front of you at a moment of grief is a document that was prepared before that grief existed. Grief is not a reason to sign. Grief is a reason to wait, and I know this. If there is someone in your life who is fighting a battle, you cannot see fighting quietly, without complaint. Without asking for help they are not certain you can give, pay attention to them. Ask them if they are all right, and then wait through the first answer, because the first answer is often not the true one. The people who protect us most completely are sometimes the ones we think need our protection. Margaret taught people to read for 26 years because she believed that knowledge is the only protection that cannot be taken away from you. She spent the last 14 months of her life proving that she was right. I am still here because of her. The least I can do is make sure someone hears what she did. If this story reached you, leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Some stories need to be told. This was one of them.